This episode is not an attack on belief. It is not a judgment on parenting. It is a call, a quiet, urgent one, to reflect, to open a conversation that centers one thing: the unseen cost of early exposure. We use ancient metaphors not to preach, but to reveal. We tell hard truths not to shame, but to protect what is still soft, still forming. If anything in this touches discomfort, let it be the kind that awakens, not wounds. Because this is about children, not in theory, but in reality. And every child deserves more than survival. They deserve to remain whole for as long as the world will allow. They say the first act of knowing was disobedience. But maybe it was something more silent, not a defiant shout, not a hand swatting God's command. Maybe it was the whisper of curiosity in a mind too new to measure risk, a reach before readiness, a desire to know, before understanding what knowing truly costs. This is where the story begins, not just for Adam and Eve, but for all of us, and especially for the small ones who come into this world without armor, not sinners, not rebels, but vessels of wonder, unarmed and uncloaked. Adam and Eve were not evil. They were children walking in the garden barefoot, blind to the serpent's cunning, deaf to consequence, innocent enough to believe that touching the edge wouldn't unravel the center. They did not fall in malice. They fell in exposure. Their eyes opened, but their spirits fractured. What they gained in knowledge, they lost in safety. And that fall never stopped echoing. It ripples through time, not through myths or metaphors alone, but through everyday stories written in silence and shadow. In every child who sees too much, too early. In every tiny soul handed the weight of reality before their hands are steady enough to carry it. The first fall isn't just a chapter in scripture. It's a caution written in the blueprint of being. A divine parable, not of punishment, but of protection. The first warning to guard innocence not with iron, but with time, love, and watchful eyes. Because every child born carries a garden within. A place where play should grow like wildflowers, where trust should be the air they breathe, where mystery unfolds at the pace of safety. But too often that garden is trampled. Not by snakes, but by schedules too full and eyes too tired. By screens, by strangers, by silence, by the slow erosion of vigilance. A child is born into a world of light and shadow, where innocence should take root in quiet soil, yet too often finds itself thrust into storms it cannot weather. Their minds, still scaffolding dreams, their hearts, still learning rhythm. But the world does not wait. The world shouts, it invades, it interrupts. And a child without shields, without sentinels, becomes the site of the next fall. Not all falls make noise. Some are quiet collapses, inside growing minds. Some begin before the child ever has words for grief. Before they know what fear is called, they already know its taste. And it is not enough to protect a child in part. A child needs to be protected, not just in the womb, not just in the home, but in the unseen spaces. Between sentences, beneath glances, in schools, in media, in the eyes of those given quiet access. Because harm does not always announce itself. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it wears the face of normal. Sometimes it sounds like a compliment. Sometimes it's the silence after the wrong thing happens. The tree of knowledge still stands, and the fruit still glows with forbidden allure. It appears in pixels, in overheard arguments, in the absence of affection, in violence wrapped in humor, in images meant for eyes far older. And children still reach, because they are wired to explore, to imitate, to trust. And when the tree is left unguarded, it is not a question of the fruit will be touched, but when. This is the modern Eden. And the fall still happens. Not because the child was sinful, but because no one said, not yet. No one moved the fruit. No one stood watch. And so the cycle begins again. A child reaching too soon. A child exposed too early. A child taught how to carry knowledge before being taught how to carry themselves. The story of Adam and Eve isn't just ancient mythology. It's biological, psychological, instructive. It is a divine template about what happens when the hunger for experience outruns the readiness for it. And that is the very definition of trauma. Not just pain, but pain without preparation. Not just exposure, but exposure without safety. We don't protect children by keeping them ignorant. We protect them by timing their awakening, by walking with them, by shielding when necessary, and revealing only when they are ready to see. The first fall was never a punishment. It was a warning. It was the universe whispering through parable, "Guard the young, not just from danger, but from the knowledge that becomes danger when carried too soon." Because when innocence is shattered, when the veil lifts too early, the body survives, but the soul stumbles, and in that stumble, the architecture of fear begins to rise, brick by brick, neural pathway by neural pathway, memory by memory. And unless someone intervenes, unless someone sees and shields, that fear becomes a home, and that home becomes a future. The first fall lives on, in headlines, in hallways, in hushes, in laughter that covers discomfort, in behaviors that mask bruises no eye can see. But just as the fall continues, so does the A-child cannot know what they are not ready to hold. But we can. We can hold the watch, we can name the dangers, we can tend the garden because the cost of looking away is too high, and no fruit, however sweet, however sacred, is worth the collapse of a child's sense of safety. The first fall did not end in Eden. It continues wherever innocence is left unguarded, but it can end, with eyes open, with hearts awake, with trees watched over, with one simple truth remembered: a child needs to be protected everywhere.